Hello everyone, and welcome to the second and final live stream event of this run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm guessing if you've followed the course all the way through to week 6, you'll know who I am by now. My name's Graham McPhee. I'm the lead educator on the programme, and I'm based at University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. So thank you everyone for joining and watching us, whether you're doing it in real time. Equally, I know a lot of people watch the recording afterwards. So what I'm going to do over the next kind of 35 minutes or so, similar format to 2 weeks ago, if you watched and listened to that, is pick up and respond to various comments and questions and posts that have been made, specifically focusing on kind of the final 2 weeks, weeks 5 and 6, also going back into some earlier material as well, and then just kind of aiming to pull some threads together as we finish the course here at the end of week 6. And I mean, that's a good place to start, and to say kind of thank you to everybody for your participation and for your comments. I mentioned in the live stream 2 weeks ago, this is our 10th run of Caring for Vulnerable Children. We've got over 3,200 learners engaging in the course this time. This is excellent. But what is probably even better is from 148 different countries. Now, I don't actually know how many countries there are in the world, but 148 is a significant proportion of them, from a whole range of places, but just picking out some that jumped out at us: Mongolia, Gambia, Paraguay, Serbia, and Madagascar. So thanks to learners from this kind of really rich kind of world context we've got. And actually, as I'm sitting here saying, I don't know how many countries there are in the world, so there's just flashed a piece of paper at me over to my right, tell me that there's 174 countries. So actually, when we think of it that way, just our kind of sphere of conversation and participants is absolutely great to have so many people participating from so many different places and sharing their different perspectives on caring for vulnerable children. So what do I plan and hope to do over the next 35 minutes or so? I'm going to have a bit of a chat about the 2-part poll, the 10 scenarios that you got in week 5, and then a bit more information in week 6. Got some interesting kind of outcomes there, so we're going to have a bit of chat about that. We're going to think about Billy's story, because Billy's story is now concluded. Now, and I actually kind of say this now, if you're watching this and you haven't watched the final part of Billy's story, because it only becomes available later in the week, then you might want to pause watching this just now and then go and watch Billy's story, see the conclusion of that, and then come back and do this, because if not, that you're going to get a spoiler. You're going to get the end of Billy's story. So we'll talk about Billy's story, and then we're going to talk about kind of some of the discussion points that have been raised about poverty more generally, and also kind of residential childcare. There's some interesting conversations coming up, especially in week 4, and I thought it might be good to touch on a couple of those, and then just pull things together towards the end. So starting with the 2-part poll. So in week 5, you were given 10 very short scenarios. So a similar exercise to what you were asked to do in week 1. I give you 10 scenarios and ask you to select 3 that you were most concerned about. And then in week 6, we extended each of those scenarios, again, only by a kind of certain amount, not giving a kind of vast amount of information, and ask people, right, does this change anything? What are your 3 now? And if you've been on the page in week 6, you'll see the results for the second poll and how the numbers compare and contrast to the first time you voted in week 5. And as ever, there's some interesting numbers and statistics coming out of this. And I'm going to start with scenario 2, which involves Jane, who is 7, and Jim, who is 5. And in many ways, this is, I think, the most interesting statistic to jump out of this scenario for us. In the first week, you get the information that their mother lives with a man who regularly physically assaults her. Neighbours have reported their concerns to the police. And when that was the information that you had in week 5, 55% of you identified that as one of your 3 most worrying scenarios, and perhaps not unsurprisingly. When we move into week 6 and you get some additional information, what you discover is that the children haven't necessarily been physically assaulted themselves, but they have witnessed this. They've witnessed their mother being assaulted, and the concerns regard that. And on getting that extra information, Jane and Jim's in week 6 in the second poll went down from 55% to 26% of you, so more than halved. And we've now, rather than having over half of you saying that this is one of the most concerning scenarios, just pretty much a quarter of you. And it's perhaps interesting just to pause and kind of unpick what might be going on there and think about kind of some of the implications of that. So we can perhaps assume, and some of the comments that people have put in the thread underneath the page would seem to suggest that a number of participants are viewing this as less of a concern because the children themselves are not being assaulted. And whilst they've witnessed it, they've never physically been hit. So they're seeing this as kind of less concerning and less vulnerability in some way. However, our knowledge about domestic abuse, our knowledge about the impact of children witnessing domestic abuse, being in a house where domestic abuse is happening, our knowledge and the research about this is quite clear about the profound and deep-rooted impact that this can have in children in terms of exposing them to that, to the trauma, to the fear, to that kind of that behaviour, and about the both short-term and long-term impact that can have on children in regards to their sense of security, emotional development, how can that impact on their development more long term if this is an ongoing pattern of behaviour in the household, how it can impact on their ability to form relationships, to form attachments, how it can impact on their ability to perform at school and be comfortable and be settled in a whole variety of settings. So the detrimental impact of witnessing domestic abuse can be profound for many children and young people, is profound for many children and young people. So given what we know, it's interesting to see the number go down from 55% to 26%. And that would appear to suggest that for a number of people, there's perhaps not that knowledge or acknowledgement of the fact that the children don't need to physically be the direct victims of any assault or abuse. Being part of the household, witnessing their mother being assaulted, being threatened, and the entire kind of climate of fear, the entire environment that can be created because of that, it would appear that a number of participants are perhaps not recognising the severity and impact of that, and that seems to go from 55 down to 26%. So I guess what I would encourage people is on reflection, if you were one of the people that selected it first time round and not second time round, and kind of I just encourage you to think a bit further about this whole issue, to kind of think about potential other resources or reading around this, so that you can perhaps kind of furnish yourself with more information in order that you develop a more full understanding of the impact of domestic abuse. So I'd say out of the 10 scenarios in terms of changes, that is far and away the most significant or noteworthy change of the 10 scenarios. And it was one of the biggest numerical changes as well. The other or the kind of next biggest numerical change would be scenario 1, which involved Kelly, who was 14. Now her change went in the opposite direction, because Kelly in week 5, when you got the scenario the first time round, she's 14, she doesn't attend school regularly, and when she does, she falls asleep in class, and she was referred by her guidance teacher. The first time round, she was only getting 4%. And I guess when we compare what you had for Kelly first time round compared to some of the other scenarios, perhaps wasn't surprising that she's only getting 4%. However, when we move into week 6, we get more information about Kelly, and we actually get more information about what's happening at home, some of the circumstances that she's living in, and the caring roles, or caring role that she has been required to take on. And we see Kelly's numbers rise from 4% to 38%. That's a really significant rise. And I guess, again, unsurprisingly, given now what we know. And it's probably kind of quite a good example. Aware of this kind of first time round as well, with the poll that we set you in week 1. When social workers or care professionals are in practice and kind of thinking about some of these scenarios, they'll often, or we're told that they'll be dealing with far more information for the purpose of these learning exercises. As part of this course, we've given you very small amounts of information in order to form some initial judgments and think about how we might move forward, and how you might classify and I guess rate and grade levels of vulnerability and risk. What this scenario does is illustrate kind of quite vividly how a little bit more information changes the perspective of a great number of people. In this instance, 34% of you changed, and Kelly moved from not being in the top 3 in terms of kind of levels of vulnerability to being there. And I guess that there's a link there in terms of the role and task of assessment, and when thinking about how we best respond to vulnerable children, about how, be it, as I say, social workers, teachers, child protection professionals, youth workers, whoever the professionals might be, about the centrality and the importance of gathering information and threading that information into assessments, so that assessments are based on as much knowledge as possible, and those assessments then dictating the interventions and the services that are offered. So Kelly was an interesting example in terms of, you get more information, you became more concerned, versus Jane and Jim. What I'd encourage everybody is, if you haven't already, go into the page in week 6 and have a look at the scores and see how they've changed or not. And if you get any comments or reflections on that, then please post a comment. What I'd like to do now is move on to Billy's story, because we've also got to week 6 and we're getting to not just the end of the course, but the end of Billy's story. And at the end of week 5, Billy was at the Children's Hearing in week 5. We left the story where the panel were about to make their decision, and we created another poll. We asked you to give your views on what you thought was the best option for Billy, and the panel were considering 2 options. One was about Billy remaining at home with his mum and continuing to be supported there, and the second option was a short-term foster care placement to try and provide some support in that way, and some respite and extra protection for Billy. And we asked you kind of what you thought was the best option there. Now, again, I'll just say that if you've not watched part 6 of Billy's story, because it's now up on the site, then probably stop here in terms of this resource. Go and watch Billy's story, look at some of the conversation that's happened, and then jump back in here. So, in terms of your vote, 71% of you said that you thought Billy would be best remaining at home, and 29% of you thought that Billy would be best placed in a temporary foster placement. Now, you've watched, or I'm assuming you've watched the last part of Billy's story, and you'll have seen that in our story, Billy remained at home. But when you watch Billy's story and kind of listen to the conversation, I guess, or the narrative that runs over Billy's story, you'll get a sense from that we're kind of quite clear about, or trying to be as clear as we can be, that there are lots of Billies out there facing challenges. There are lots of Billies and lots of families such as Billies out there facing a variety of different challenges, and any children's hearing or within any scenario, different cases can go in different directions, different outcomes can be argued or not. And certainly, as your vote suggests, 29% of you thinking, well, actually a better response here would be a short-term foster placement. And I've pulled out 2 or 3 comments, hopefully to exemplify some of the conversations that perhaps feel relevant here. So first of all, I've got a question posted by Claire Hall. So Claire, thanks for posting your question. At the start of it, you said, I'd like to know how Billy's stories end. So I'm presuming you posted this before the ending went up, so you now know that. And so, but you ask a couple of questions that I think are quite pertinent, just thinking about the case overall. Does his mother's mental health improve? Does the level of support they receive enable them to make the changes in their life to ensure Billy doesn't miss school and Mum keeps her job? And I would also like to know whether the educator agrees with the decision of the panel, and if not, what supports they would ideally like to have seen being put in place. Now, I'm just going to read out 2 or 3 comments and then try and, rather than respond to them individually, can I respond to them in the round? So those questions from Claire, and I've picked out 2 other comments that were posted, one by Karen Skinner and one by Therese Grace. So Karen and Therese, thanks also for your comments. So Karen made the comment, whilst Karen's mental health continues to decline without proper support, the situation is not going to improve. There needs to be a proper supervision of the situation to monitor both Karen and Billy. Billy needs to be encouraged to spend time out with the home, maybe at young carers groups or with Stephen for the good of his own mental health. And then she finished by saying maybe some time apart might have helped both of them. So we'll keep that comment in mind. And then finally, Therese makes a comment, I felt the right decision was made. Of course, it's not perfect because it doesn't really change the circumstances, but I feel the trauma for Billy of being separated from his mother and the uncertain place he may find himself in, i.e. unfamiliar surroundings, etc., this would add more stress. At least the home is not in a violent situation, but it's one that does not function well. He could develop resentful feelings if separated from his lack of control of the situation, which could damage the situation more. So thanks for those questions and comments, and I think there's a number of themes within them that are kind of important for us to think about. I think for most people kind of following Billy's story through and thinking about the decision about what's best, the comments here kind of exemplify the main kind of push or pull of the 2 different arguments here. Is on one hand we can say, well, perhaps some time apart might have helped them both, but on the other hand, the point being made by Therese, and she actually describes it as the trauma of being separated. For Billy, the trauma of being separated from his mother. And I think it's also important to think about what impact that might have had on Billy's mum, also in terms of kind of seeing in some ways how potentially fragile and vulnerable she is. And I think in kind of thinking about a situation like this and trying to identify both the strengths and the areas of concern, whilst there are undoubtedly areas of significant concern in regards to kind of how Billy is getting on and his overall situation, the absolute biggest strength in this situation is Billy's relationship with his mum, and the value he places in that. Despite the fact that it carries worries, significant worries, and it could be argued caring responsibilities that ideally we wouldn't like Billy to be exposed to. Despite these, the huge positives and strength that come from Billy's relationship with his mum and being at home for his mum and being able to do things both with his mum and for his mum, that it could be argued that to remove Billy from that and taking away the single biggest strength and protective factor that he's got, could that, despite perhaps being well intentioned, could that end up being more detrimental? And that's the point that Therese makes, and about the fact that Billy could experience this as kind of quite traumatic in some ways. He could certainly be in a situation where he's potentially worrying more because he's seen less of his mum, and he doesn't actually know what's going on. He doesn't know she's well. He doesn't know she's safe. And how would Billy experience this as supportive and in his own best interest? And Therese, I think, quite realistically raises the question about, well, could he kind of be resentful of this? Again, no matter how well intentioned it is, could he kind of push against this kind of sort of response? So but equally, we know that sometimes taking decisions to support and protect children where we feel there are vulnerability and risks sometimes or often involves us having to make difficult decisions and have difficult conversations with children and young people where we acknowledge that, well, ideally we know that both you and I would like certain things to happen, but unfortunately that our assessment is that we don't feel that the kind of things are in a place for that to happen. And these difficult conversations are quite often the role of, be it social workers, child protection officers, residential care workers, teachers, or kind of whole range of people that are involved in caring for vulnerable children. And going back to Claire's first question, right? So you asked Claire, does his mum's mental health improve? Well, Billy's story is fictional in that sense, so there is no answer to that question in the sense of our story ended there. But you asked the question, does the level of support they receive enable them to make changes in their life to ensure Billy doesn't miss school and mum keeps her job? I think there's a very kind of strong argument, and I think what Billy's story hopefully exemplifies is that often one of the best ways to support children and young family is to support the whole family unit. And we've seen various comments and threads actually from week 1 all the way through to week 6 saying the best way to support Billy is to support his mum, because if we put the support for mum and support the family unit as a whole, then that is the upshot. The impact of that is that life at home is going to be more settled. It's going to be kind of less worrying and stressful for Billy, and that will leave him in a better place in terms of growth and development, attending school, and educational attainment. So the question there about, do they receive the level of support? Well, that would ideally be what happens. Certainly in a Scottish context and a UK context, and I want to link this part of the discussion to some more general comments and conversations we've had in week 6 again about the impact of poverty, and some of the things going on in the UK this week, just in relation to some reports and some stats about poverty, sadly bring this into sharp relief again. So what I would say about Billy's story is that Billy's story is obviously fictional, but it's based very much in a reality. I think we would suggest that there are thousands of children and families such as Billy's up and down the country facing these sorts of challenges. And the question about, are they getting enough support in order to help them make changes, in order to kind of stop crises developing, and to allow kind of family units to stay together and function to the best of their ability. The ability of the state and organisations to deliver those supports is increasingly getting challenged by economics, by policy decisions, by funding decisions, and the impact of poverty all of this is kind of really significant. So this week, kind of just two particular stories that I've picked out, and I would want to acknowledge that the discussion round about poverty absolutely has a political element to it, and a number of you have made that comment in your posts, be it in Scotland or elsewhere. So in the UK this week, we've had a bit of a political spat getting played out, where the Philip Alston, who's the UN rapporteur on extreme poverty, has accused the UK of, in particular, the current Conservative government, their welfare policies, of enacting policies that he has likened to the policies that created 19th century workhouses. He said the UK's poorest people face lives that are solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So this is somebody who many regard as a renowned expert in this area, saying that the policies being enacted by our government are creating poverty of this level, of this type, and placing individuals and families in these situations. Now, I said we've had a bit of a political spat, and there is a political element to this because we've seen some kickback from the government, and that's not unusual when governments are criticised or questioned. That's kind of normally par for the course, and the report being questioned and critiqued, saying that it was overly political. I'm not going to kind of sit here and necessarily offer a political stance on this, but there's some really interesting questions being raised by this. But alongside this, we had a report about Scotland on it's not on target, and we're going to miss our child poverty targets. And this was a report published by the Independent Poverty and Inequality Commission, and the report highlights, and I quote here, a massive gap between the scale of Scotland's ambition to tackle child poverty and the scale of resources allocated to delivering that commitment. So again, we see this issue of resources, and a number of you in your comments in the threads about poverty and the link between poverty and vulnerability highlighted or kind of made phrases about us increasingly becoming, in the UK, a country of have and have-nots, and actually seeing some reports that have said we are becoming more like the United States in that regard, in terms of the gulf between those who have sufficient resource to live in relative comfort and live the sort of lifestyle that many people would aspire to, versus those who simply don't have that ability. And perhaps more starkly within that, the amount of some of the phrases that are used about the kind of working poor. So so some of these stats getting masked by the fact that we'll often see statements about we've never had so many people in work, and some analysis, that's true. But when we actually look at the types of jobs, the working conditions, and perhaps more crucially the wages being associated with them, that we've got many families and many children within families experiencing poverty, despite the fact that these families or people within these families are in work and being caught in this cycle of poverty and this kind of poverty trap. And this is in the UK. This is an increasing concern for many people involved in this area of thinking about childcare and caring for vulnerable children. I could have picked out more stories. There's been stories in our media again over the last couple of weeks, particularly talking about head teachers talking about the shameful situation. We've got more and more children turning up at school hungry because of the inability of families to feed children poverty, and about some of the services that schools are having to develop to try and respond to some of this. We see a scarily high increase in the numbers of families and individuals being reliant on food banks. And thinking about the connection to vulnerable children in schools and food, that this then raises questions about, well, what happens to these children during holiday periods when they're not attending school? And there's actually some instances of schools trying to develop further services to try and plug some of that gap. But I think for many of us, the fact that we're in this situation where we're even having this conversation and we're thinking about these things, and going back to what Philip Alston had to say about this, has taken us back to 19th century workhouse type thinking, that this is not a good place to be. But it's not limited to the UK. I've picked out another comment here from Bridget Borman. So Bridget, thanks for your comment. Bridget's based in Australia, and she talks about issues that are particularly relevant in the UK as well. She talks about rising childcare costs, and for some families, by the time you take the childcare costs off the cost of, or the pay and everything else, is it kind of truly worth it? In that sense, a lot of charity and community organisations are now self-funded, relying on donations to operate. And then when we think about housing, electricity, food, then the reality for a lot of families living within this is quite significant. And another comment I picked out from Fiona Lowe. Fiona, thanks for making your comment. And she says, in 30 years of working in education, I am more aware of poverty in our society now than ever. Young children arriving at school cold, hungry, and inappropriate clothed shouldn't be happening in the 21st century. And then Fiona goes on to comment another concern, that the vulnerable to working poverty, parents working very hard to earn a living and yet still not able to afford to feed and clothe their children. And again, depressingly, kind of more and more evidence of this, more and more kind of instances of this, and politically in the UK, kind of lots of conversations about the whole austerity agenda and the slashing back of the state and the cutting of services. And yes, poverty is a political issue, but it's impossible to have this conversation without acknowledging that dimension of it. And hopefully what some of the material in week 6, I would hope, has kind of prompted you to think about is, what do you think some of the issues are? How do they play out in your setting? Acknowledging we'll get participants here from 148 countries. No, we're based here in Scotland and the UK. So I guess kind of understandably, most of what we are talking about here is through that lens. But I guess I would encourage everybody to think about what are the different issues at play in your country and in your setting. What's the correlation between children, poverty and vulnerability, and what is the political and policy dimension to that, and how can we influence that in a way, because we absolutely know there is a correlation between poverty and the need for supports, need for services, and potentially ultimately vulnerability of children. So this is a really significant thing for us to be thinking about. In terms of kind of pulling things together, because coming towards the end of the session here, and it's getting towards the end of the course, I'd like to just kind of first say that kind of thank you everybody for staying with us for the whole 6 weeks, for your comments across all 6 weeks of the course. Again, if there's anything I've said today that you either agree with, or is perhaps more likely the case disagree with, then please comment on the page, and we can keep the conversation going whilst this is the last live stream event. It doesn't have to be the end of the conversation in that sense. But I'd also like to take the opportunity to say, and I'll put a post on this under the live stream page, is that if you've enjoyed the programme and you would be potentially interested in further study here at the University of Strathclyde, as well as being the lead educator on caring for vulnerable children. I'm also the course lead on a distance learning master's programme. We have a master's programme, Child and Youth Care Studies. It's completely by distance learning. So similar to this, there's no attendance requirements to be either in Glasgow or Scotland. It's a master's level qualification, so either a first degree or something equivalent is required to as part of an entry or a part of an application, sorry. And it's aimed at practitioners already in the field. So this course at this stage wouldn't be suitable for you if you're thinking child and youth care is something I would like to get into, but you're working in another setting, because the course is set up and created in a way that in order to complete all the learning and educational tasks, you actually need to be in practice. So it's aimed at practitioners. It's a part-time distance learning course. You do it over either 2 or 3 years. So I'll post the link to it in the comments page underneath the live stream. You can get more information about it there. You can also get my email address, and if you have any specific questions about the programme that you'd like to ask, then feel free to get in contact with me. And probably something else that would be worth mentioning, that as a learner on the Caring for Vulnerable Children programme, if you apply for and succeed in getting a place on the Distance Learning Masters programme, if you produce proof of having completed this Caring for Vulnerable Children course, the completion of certificate, then you would be eligible for a 10% fee discount on the Child and Youth Care Studies course. So there's a nice link from one to the other. The Masters course starts in September. We have an intake every September, so if it is something you'd be interested in, but perhaps not as immediate as September this year, then it's something to keep on your radar possibly for further down the line. But I'd just like to finish by again kind of thanking everybody for your participation over the last 6 weeks. We hope that you've enjoyed the programme, the course. Please keep the conversations going, especially on the live stream page if there's any responses to anything that I've said today. And goodbye for now. So thank you.